Hi again, welcome back to yet another new video. A few weeks ago I was out testing a newly acquired Mamiya 645 Junior. Spoiler alert, amazing camera, one of my new favorites. Speaking of favorites, welcome to Felix Favorites. Today we'll talk about my favorite cameras in various formats and sizes. Let's not waste time and start talking cameras. Hello and how's it going? As the title already states, this video is about my favorite cameras in various states of health. Some work fine, some not so much, and others are in need of a repair. All of them have one thing in common though. They are near and dear to my heart, and if I pick one of them up, I'll have a blast. Guaranteed. Some of the cameras I'm going to mention I've already talked about in the past, so I'll try not to talk too much about those. Let's dive right into it and start with digital. If you have watched one of my first two videos, you know how much I love my Canon EOS 5D Mark II, so I'll just quickly go over it. This was my first professional DSLR I bought from my first paycheck back in 2012, used, and has been with me ever since without ever skipping a beat. I'm shooting most of my digital stuff with that camera using either the 50mm 1.8 Canon or a 90mm 2.8 Tamron lens. Or I'm adapting either Minolta or Suico lenses if I'm in the mood for vintage glass. As pretty much all cameras I'll mention in this video, I'll never get rid of her, and I will try to keep her running as long as I can. Well, that's it already for digital. Let's start talking film cameras and begin with 35mm SLRs. If you've watched my last video, you know this camera, my Olympus OM1. Since then I've already shot 2 more rolls through it, and man, this is just an amazing camera. The light meter is off by 1 stop, so for the moment I'm compensating by dialing the ISO 1 stop lower, but it's on my long to-do list of camera repairs. You guys already know I'm a 50 guy, so this 50mm 1.4 Suico is living on the camera, although after a bit of testing I have a feeling that my 1.8 might even be a bit sharper. So if I don't need that stop of light, I'll probably put the 1.8 on it. But I'll have to do some scientific tests on my 5D to verify the sharpness of the 1.8, and I might even do a video about that topic. I'm also on the lookout for 100mm or the legendary 85mm, because besides the 50, 90 is my second favorite focal length. The OM1 has already more or less replaced my LX as go-to SLR, and for now it stays like that. Maybe if I'm handling a Nikon F or F2 for the first time I'll change my mind, but for now, the OM1 it is. Oops, let's close that up. Before we get into rangefinders, we have to talk about another camera or manufacturer, Minolta with their SRT line of cameras. As I've mentioned in my very first video, the SRT was my very first camera that rekindled my love for photography and started my interest in analog photography. Or not just photography, pretty much a less digital and more analog way of life. If you say camera, this is pretty much exactly what I'm picturing in my head. How a camera should look like, how a child draws a camera. Rectangular, big, no fuss. This super heavy tank of a camera was built to last. It's a fully mechanical camera and is easy to disassemble and repair, and they are pretty cheap. In my eyes, the absolute best camera to get into photography and learn the basics with. As long as you regularly CLA them, they'll work forever and probably outlive us. Now that we've covered SLRs, let's talk rangefinders. Unfortunately, I made the big mistake to sell my Olympus 35 RC, which was my first rangefinder, and that camera would be 100% in that video if I still owned it. Although I sold my Olympus to finance another rangefinder that deepened my love for that type of camera. My Yashica YE from 1959. The Yashica YE is basically a Leica 3 copy, but got released a lot later. She has a lever film advance instead of the knob of the original Leica 3. But like the Leica, she has two separate rangefinder and viewfinder windows, bottom loading with no rear door, takes Leica thread mount lenses and has more or less the looks of the Leica 3. I've bought this camera from a seller in Japan because at least here in Europe they are pretty rare cameras. And that's part of the reason that drew me to this camera as my next rangefinder. As I already mentioned, I sold my 35RC and was on the lookout for a new rangefinder with exchangeable lenses. There's millions of Leica 3 copies, there's the M system, the Contax system, there's the Bessers from Voigtlander, there's Barnick Leicas, but pretty much everything at that point was out of reach money-wise. Except for the cheap Japanese Leica copies. So I started looking at pages over pages full of Leica copies. The Soviet copies, like the Sorkis, I had no real interest or trust in. And then I stumbled upon the YE and something clicked and told me, that's the next camera for you. I started looking for YEs and found a very good deal on eBay for a body from Japan. And a few weeks later I had a camera body in pristine condition but no lens for it. I found an original Yashica 5cm 2.8 lens for a good deal on a German website and started shooting with that combo. Although I got a Canon 50mm 1.8 later as main lens. It took me quite some time to get used to the double windows, the one on the left to focus and the other one to compose, but it became second nature after a while. The only real gripe I have with the camera, at least as a guy wearing glasses, is the tiny viewfinder, which really is a pain to use. But ever since I got this camera, she's never skipped a beat and just worked flawlessly since then. A funny story from last year, we were preparing for a vacation in Italy and I decided I'd take my trusty old OM2N. 2 days before we left, I shot my last pre-vacation roll through the OM2 and the rewind mechanism inside the camera broke. At that time I had no spare parts at hand to fix her up right away, so I decided I'd take my backup Minolta X700 instead. Started her up, wouldn't fire, the capacitors were dead and I had no replacements at home. Then I unpacked yet another backup camera, my Ricoh KR5, which never failed before. I wanted to wind the camera on and to check that if the shutter still worked. Winding mechanism was seized up, wouldn't advance anymore. So involuntarily I took the YE and boy, I didn't regret that decision. Some of those pictures were just amazing and serve as a great memory of some really good times in Italy. This camera stays for good and it's just so fun to shoot, even though it's quite a bit slower to operate than the M2. Speaking of slower to operate, this here is my card size Contax II from 1937. Yes, 1937. Back then, this was a direct competitor to the Leica 3 and did a lot of things very different. Beginning with a combined rangefinder and viewfinder window and a super long rangefinder base length for extreme focusing accuracy in 1937. Leica released the combined range and viewfinder window with the M3 in 1954, that's nearly 20 years later. This thing is an incredible piece of German over-engineering. Everything just feels so solid and smooth. Because of Leica's patents of the vertical traveling cloth focal plane shutter, Carl Zeiss, with Dr. Küpenbender as chief developer of that camera system, developed a horizontal traveling garage door shutter out of metal splines so the sun wouldn't burn holes in your shutter. It had a maximum shutter speed of 1/1250th of a second instead of 1/1000th of the Leicas. It also featured two lens mounts, one with focusing inside the camera for normal lenses with 50mm, focusing inside the camera, and another inner lens mount for longer lenses with integrated focusing in the lenses. The 50mm lenses are just tiny because they didn't need an internal focus helical. I could go on and on about this camera. For the longest time this was my holy grail rangefinder because it wasn't the typical Leica anyone wanted. I've got this one very cheap without a lens because it has a weird shutter capping problem which is caused by the spring in the lower roller. Long story short, it desperately needs a full overhaul, but at the moment I've got no time at all for that. Nonetheless, I still shot a roll through that camera and I love the process and the operation of that thing so much that it instantly went into my favorites. I'm doing a whole video about the process of repairing and restoring this amazing piece of history and engineering, but it'll take quite some time to get to that, I think. Speaking of masterpieces, you already know what's coming next and which camera is closing the 35mm segment. Ta-da! My well-used, but just perfect to me, Leica M2 from 1960. If I had to choose one camera for the rest of my life, it would be that one. Yeah, I know, blah blah, Leica fanboy, overpriced cameras, overhyped, Japanese cameras are better, and so on. I didn't like Leica cameras very much, and before I got mine, I thought of Leicas as overhyped hipster cameras. No offense. Until this M2 fell into my hands and I loaded my first roll in. I've never gone through 36 frames this quick. It feels solid, simple, everything moves with precision and ease. It's just a pure joy to use. It really is true, you need to try Leica to get it before judging it for the people running around with them. I've already talked about my M2 in the last videos. If you want a special Leica episode where we talk more about Leica, maybe even the whole lineup, even though I only have that one, tell me in the comments. So this was the last of my 35mm favorites. Let's continue quickly with medium format. We'll start off with my first proper medium format camera after dipping my toes in with the Louboutin. It's my Mamiya RB67. This was my first proper medium format camera that I got and the one I shot by far the most rolls through. This right here is my forever medium format. She's chunky, big, loud and a pain in the butt to lug around, but also gorgeous as heck. And looking through the big waist level viewfinder is just magical. Being an old professional camera, she's fully mechanical, has no built-in light meter, and was originally designed for studio use. Because no one would carry around that thing, right? The Mamiya lenses are incredibly sharp. Also, just listen to that sound. My gosh, I love that camera. I've only got one lens for that camera and that's the 90mm 3.8. And for now, that's all I need. Seriously. I'll talk a bit more about that camera in the upcoming Mamiya 645 video because I'm comparing the two a bit. So that's it for the RB67 for now. From my biggest medium format camera, we're getting to my smallest. My card size Super Ikonta 531 in 645 format. This is a folding rangefinder. Which has its origins, just like my Contax, in the 30s, but got improved and built up into the 60s. I came to this camera because I was on the lookout for a pocketable medium format camera. I first got the 6x9 version, which has a mask to shoot it in 645 too. And after a few rolls, I realized that I really liked the camera, but I also realized that I always shot it with the mask in. So I went on to search for a dedicated 645 Super Ikonta because, well, they're seriously tiny, as you can see. So I got this one. The focusing was a bit stiff and the rangefinder and the lens were hazy. I cleaned them up and now she works fine. And as I already said, those cameras are tiny. I mean, compared to my M2. Yeah, sure, it's a folder, but still it shoots medium format. Those cameras are a bit slow to operate, so definitely not snapshot or sports photography cameras, but they got their very own and unique look, both in how they look and how they render pictures. Let's put that aside. Like that. Now it's time for a run-up that I got fairly recently, but stole my heart immediately. My new to me Mamiya 645 Junior. I recently stumbled upon this camera in untested state with a corroded battery chamber and the 150mm lens, just that one. I cleaned out the battery chamber, put in a fresh battery, and she sprung back to life. As all of my cameras, she's not perfect. She's got that classic desilvering line, the prism finder, the focusing is stiff, but man, what an amazing camera. She feels and handles kind of like a mini-me of my RB. She won't ever replace my RB, but as a more compact and quicker to operate smaller sibling because of integrated metering and just a smaller form factor, she's an amazing companion. I've only shot 2 rolls through that camera so far, so we are still getting to know each other, but I'll definitely do a full video on that camera and make a comparison with my RB, shooting both of them simultaneously. So that's it for medium format cameras. There's one last camera I quickly want to glance over. It's the 3-ton elephant in the room and my only large format camera, a Graflex ground graphic. The Graflex was a very popular press camera from the 1930s onwards. This one I've bought in 2023 after I started developing and scanning medium format and I wanted even bigger negatives. And these negatives are enormous. At least for me, who hasn't shot 8x10 so far. Originally, I was on the lookout for a normal 4x5 field camera, but got a good deal on the Graflex, so I bought her and thought I could sell her again if I ever get a real 4x5 camera. You know, the Graflex, being a press camera, is designed for quick use and has a few limitations. The Graflex doesn't support all of the movements of a classic 4x5 cameras. The back has no movements and doesn't rotate, but for now, where I'm still in the process of learning large format and getting a routine with it, it's fine and I'm happy with it. Speaking quickly about my own Graflex, this particular one is a crown graphic, meaning it has no integrated focal plane shutter like the Speed graphics. She's, at least according to the serial number, from around 1962. And I've got 2 lenses for her. This Roden stock Anastigmat 13.5 centimeters f4.8 and a Kodak Ektar 127mm lens from a 3x4 Graflex, but I don't have a lens board for that lens and I need to repair the shutter. So for now I'm just sticking to that lens, to the Roden stock lens. The camera normally comes equipped with a coupled rangefinder, a viewfinder and a sports finder, but I stripped everything away to just use her as a view camera and learn large format, and that's how I intend to continue to use my Graflex. I'm also on the lookout for another wooden field camera, maybe a Vista or a Toyo, but as these are expensive and I'm still learning the basics of large format photography, it has no priority for me, the Graflex will do. I'll do a video on my whole large format process over the course of this summer, if you're interested in that kind of photography. And there you have it. My favorite cameras. I know those are quite a lot of cameras for just being my favorite, but I can't just focus on one camera and work with that, even though that might be way better for me in developing my style, technique and getting better at photography. This might be a future project I think of. It's just sometimes I'm in the mood for rangefinders, the next moment I want to shoot an SLR, and then the next day I want to go out with a medium format or my large format camera. Are you having the same problem? Or do you have no problem at all sticking to just one camera or one system and just shoot away with your Leica or your Canon E1 or your medium format cameras? Tell me in the comments about your favorite cameras and maybe how you got them. I think that's all for today. Go out, shoot, and have fun, and I'll see you next time. Bye!